Welcome back, one and all, to the Boston Celtics Newsfeed, powered by CLNS Media. I'm Mike Walsh, manager of the Celtics Newsfeed, and this is day 15 of our 2017-18 NBA preview. We have made it to the midway point. We'll be going day by day, releasing a new team preview each day leading up to opening night, October 17th in Cleveland. Before we get started today, I want to mention that the CLNS Media team has been all over training camp, and our YouTube page at youtube.com/CLNS Media is packed with content from Monday's preseason opener. The Celtics retake the floor tomorrow. That's Friday evening against the Philadelphia 76ers. So head over to youtube.com/CLNS Media, subscribe there, and you won't miss a thing. Now, each of these preview podcasts will be accompanied by an outline blog post on our site, clnsradio.com. Today we're going to be joined by CLNS Celtics Editor at Large Cory Prescott to preview the Minnesota Timberwolves. With a new head coach and an exceedingly young roster last season, the Wolves kind of disappointed. But they've retooled in big ways this summer with the additions of Jimmy Butler and Jeff Teague, and now look like one of the most exciting teams in the NBA. So without further ado, let's get into day 15 of the Boston Celtics Newsfeed's 2017-18 NBA season preview with Cory Prescott and the Minnesota Timberwolves. We're hit the midway point here, and we have probably one of the more interesting teams to talk about. Joining us to talk about the Minnesota Timberwolves, Cory Prescott, CLNS Celtics Editor at Large. Cory, it's an early morning. We're here to do this, and we are psyched. How's it going?
I'm pumped. I mean, so last time we did Giannis. This time we get to do Towns. So it shows you the depth of good young players in this league. So T-Wolves should be good this year.
Yeah, they're going to be very, very intriguing. I think everybody knows basically what happened over the offseason in Minnesota. Maybe there's a couple things we'll touch on that people may have forgotten given how outrageously hectic everything's been. But Jimmy Butler, the big addition here to a non-playoff team last year in the Timberwolves. And we'll get to that. Start last year, this was, as you say in your post on clnsradio.com, sort of a trendy pick last year. And they had a lot of 2 number 1 overall picks, a lot of, young, strong talent, a brand new head coach that everybody is very high on in Tom Thibodeau. What happened last year to this team and how they sort of fell out, I guess?
Yeah, they really were like the trendy pick, kind of like the league pass team or the young team that everyone was pining for to kind of make that jump. Maybe like this year's Nuggets team, actually, but they were really terrible defensively, which is really not indicative of a Tom Thibodeau coach team. I think they were in the bottom half, maybe like 26 defensively. I have it written down here somewhere. Andrew Wiggins, drafted number 1 a few years ago. I mean, he kind of came in pegged as a defensive stopper. I know he's getting some comparisons to, Scottie Pippen level defensive abilities. He really hasn't done anything like that. He's been pretty terrible defensively. Like all the defensive metrics, advanced defensive metrics, kind of peg him as, or have him as like a pretty minus defender. He actually owned the same amount of defensive win shares as Jamal Crawford, who may be one of the worst, if not the worst. And it was actually his new teammate this year. I'm sure we'll get to that. But Wiggins really disappointed last year with his defense. He can score the ball, and that makes the Butler acquisition that much more intriguing. Towns put up an amazing year. Like Wiggins, he needs to improve defensively as well. But I mean, he might be the best, young big man, best young player in this league. I mean, you can really peg him as that if you want. Up with Giannis, up with Anthony Davis and Porzingis. But he's a franchise cornerstone guy, so they at least have that. And then they were able to get a pretty decent season out of Zach LaVine before he tore his ACL, but I think it was just, at that point with them, it was just too much scoring and not enough defense, and I think replacing LaVine with any sort of veteran, but you add in Butler, I mean, that's a huge win, so they were a bit disappointing last year, but this year it's really pointing up for them, and there's no excuses this year.
Yeah, I think bottom line, just too young of a team to really do any sort of one culture changing in one off season for Thibodeau. Just wasn't going to happen with a team full of, guys in their late teens and early 20s. So yeah, this off season, you have them as an A, which I think is a fairly common grade to give a team that picks up a guy like Jimmy Butler. Butler isn't a kid, essentially, and my problem is, kids aren't going to win in the NBA if you have a team full of your best players are kids. You're just not going to win. Butler comes in, he's a 28-year-old, multi-time All-Star, multi-time All-NBA player. As a pure addition, what's your take on Jimmy Butler?
Well, as a Celtics fan, it's a little frustrating when you see what he goes for to Minnesota, whereas, all the rumors that were coming out for, him coming to Boston. So that's a little bit frustrating, but it's an amazing pickup for them. He's 28, as you said, all NBA players. They don't really, fall off trees too often. There's some concern. I mean, I don't think he's a bad chemistry guy, but he's never really been a part of a harmonious atmosphere in those Chicago teams. There's always some sort of weird drama, either between, him and Derrick Rose, or last year with the three amigos, Butler and Wade and Rondo. So he's always been in kind of some weird situations, and he'll have to take a back seat this year and at least let Towns kind of continue to be that dominant low post and all around number one option. And then they added some other veterans I'm sure we'll get into, but Jamal Crawford, his play has been up and down this year. I didn't really like that signing, along with Taj Gibson. I like that as well, but Butler is really the guy here. One of the main offseason cogs in all the NBA, and they'll count on him to at least be maybe not a 20-point per game scorer, but in the high teens, and really just providing that veteran leadership that he can, at this point in his career, hopefully he can provide.
Yeah, real quick to review for people, the trade that brought in Jimmy Butler to Minnesota, they grabbed the 16th overall pick, which they used to take Creighton big man. I'm
Justin Patton.
Justin Patton.
Yeah, that's a pretty good pick.
And what they wind up sending out is Zach LaVine, who you mentioned, ACL injury, I think might be ready by the trade deadline, is what the Bulls would be hoping for. Chris Dunn, who was a rookie point guard last year, who had a pretty rough entry into the NBA and just flat out could not put the ball in the hoop. And the 7th overall pick, which the Bulls eventually used to take Lauri Markkanen. So yeah, the return for Chicago. We talked to Akeem Glassy earlier in this preview series about that. He's actually come around on it because Markkanen has been, I guess, impressive so far, but at initial look, definitely something to turn your nose up at. That's a rough return to get when you're sending out a player of the caliber of Jimmy Butler. One thing you did touch on, I kind of did a little bit of extra research in, is that shot, where the shots are going to come from. You mentioned, again, on CLNSradio.com, your preview, Butler averaged, I think, 16.5 field goal attempts per game last year. Actually, both Towns and Wiggins were 18-plus per game. So that's a lot of shots for those two guys to be taken. That's a lot of shots for all three of these guys to be taken. I'm not sure if, all three can sort of withstand that.
That is a huge question, whether they can share the court, share the ball, I guess, and space the floor as well. They were one of the worst three-point shooting teams last year. And Butler he'll shoot threes, but he's not really known for his marksmanship. I mean, we saw in that, if you watch that Boston-Chicago series, you really saw how one-dimensional that Bulls offense was, with pretty much just gave Butler the ball, and he'd hold the ball for a little bit, drive to the basket or pull up for a spot-up shot, or try to draw a foul or something. But, when you have other teammates like Wiggins and Towns, and there's other guys on that team as well, like Gorgie Dang, Jeff Teague, he's a shoot first point guard. Obviously Jamal Crawford likes to shoot, so there's other shots to go around. Butler kind of needs to, I wouldn't say take a back seat this year, but just kind of learn to defer when it's necessary, and to kind of get other guys involved. It's not like last year where he's playing with kind of a semi-washed up Dwayne Wade and Rajon Rondo, who doesn't really like to shoot that much. There's actual offensive firepower on this team. Yeah,
you mentioned Teague there. They wind up bringing him in over the offseason because they do trade Ricky Rubio, who had been their, sort of longtime point guard. Rubio goes to the Utah Jazz for a 2018 first-round pick. So, and I think that it was originally Oklahoma City, so it won't be much of a first-round pick this coming offseason. Is that an upgrade in your mind, Rubio to Teague? Is it a downgrade? Is it sort of a lateral move? Obviously, they are somewhat different players. One's a little more offensively geared, one's a little more defensively geared. One can shoot, one can pass. What's your take there and the fit for this team?
It's kind of a tough call because I really love Rubio, but he's been perpetually hurt, and he's been one of the worst offensive point guards in the league since he's come in. So I understand this deal more than anything else. I'm not a fan of really watching Teague. I think he's pretty much the definition of an average point guard at this point, but he can shoot the ball. he can score the ball pretty effectively. Like last year, he shot 44% from the field, 36% from three. That was, 2 seasons ago, he shot 40% from three. So they kind of need some spacing. Like, as I had mentioned previously, they're pretty poor 3-point shooting team last year. And if you added Rubio, if you kept Rubio, you'd really be just scrunching the floor down into like the free throw line because I guess a lack of marksmanship on this team right now. So Teague he's decent. I mean, I think he'll fit in well, but that's actually an interesting subplot with this team is whether he can kind of take the reins and dish out the ball and keep everyone happy. Like that's a pretty difficult job when you're dealing with guys like who need the ball and, like Towns, Wiggins, and Butler.
Today's episode of the Newsfeed Preview is sponsored by Greats, makers of the all-time greats, classic, stylish, and comfortable sneakers sold at a great price. Greats is Brooklyn's first sneaker company. They have a wide selection of both men's and women's shoes. They have versatile styles suitable for any occasion, tons of different colors, materials. Best sellers include the all-leather Royale lace-ups, and I got a pair of those, straight white, white on white. They are super fly. I love them a lot. I've been wearing them actually the past 2 weeks now with everything from suits to jeans to shorts. They look great in really everything. They also have the Worcester slip-ons. Those are another bestseller. And you guys could check those out and a lot of other great styles over at Greats.com. We've got a special deal for our audience. Save 15% on your first order with the offer code Celtics Roundtable. Go to Greats.com, that's Greats.com, and be sure to enter Celtics Roundtable to save 15% at checkout. Greats also believe so much in their shoes, they're going to offer you a no-risk return and exchange policy, guaranteeing you get the right fit and style that you love personally. That's Greats.com, use our code Celtics Roundtable, save 15%. That kind of wraps up additions. If you want to talk Jamal Crawford, Taj Gibson at all, those are sort of tertiary signings, both of which will help them do certain things. So that's definitely important. Gibson, obviously a Thibodeau favorite from his Chicago days, will help them defensively. Will help, I think, Towns defensively immensely. And if Towns is who people want to say he is, want to believe he is, this team can't be any worse than league average defensively because he has to become somewhat of a monster like an Anthony Davis. Obviously not to the level of Rudy Gobert, but one of these young, athletic, super long big men. They have to be strong defensively, and I think Taj Gibson will help him learn that.
Yeah, I really like the Gibson signing. As much as I dislike the Crawford signing, I thought it was he's a little bit past his prime. But with Gibson, still great defensively. He's tough-minded, good rebounder. You can pair him with Towns, or you can have him come off the bench. As a leader, he's been in Tibbs' system, and that's like the big difficulty with this team last year was learning Tibbs' defensive scheme. So with Gibson on there, hopefully it's having like another coach on the floor that can kind of guide Towns and help him as well.
Yeah, so we already kind of touched on what the preseason sort of training camp questions are going to be. Shot distribution, are Wiggins and Towns going to be able to lighten their load enough for Jimmy Butler to get his, and obviously the 3-point shooting thing. They're actually 2-0 in the preseason already. Two wins over the Lakers, and they beat Golden State, actually.
State, yeah.
I don't know if you have a move to make here.
Yeah, there's really not much here. Wiggins, definitely watch this, and whether Wiggins, I don't believe he's accepted that 5-year, $148 million extension. I don't know why. I'd be running into that. I'd tear a couple of ACLs to get to that contract, but I don't think he signed that. But they made their moves this offseason with Butler, obviously, and then Gibson and Crawford and Teague.
All right, so they will play the Celtics twice this regular season. Whether or not you see them potentially, shocking the world and getting out of the Western Conference, that's a whole different story. But the Celtics and Timberwolves will meet at TD Garden on Friday, January 5th, and then on Thursday, March 8th, the Celtics will head out to Minneapolis for another game there. So talk to me a little bit about this matchup. Obviously, only 2 games to really discuss here, and the Celtics went 2-0 against Minnesota last season. What do you see going down in this matchup?
That's a tough matchup for the Celtics. I think the Celtics are really going to look to push the ball this year, whereas the T-Wolves, I could see them kind of slowing it down to a half-court grind and just bullying you to death and just trying to kind of bruise you and wear you down over the course of a game, and then just execute in the half-court offense. Obviously, Towns is a stud. I mean, he averaged 22 and 16 in those 2 games last year against Boston, but I don't even think that was indicative of just how well he played and how impressive he looks when he's on the floor. So, I mean, he can take anyone. And obviously you add in Butler, who we saw in that Chicago series. He can defend just as well as anyone, any wing player. You put him on Hayward, and that's kind of a wash, actually. I mean, if you think about it, Butler versus Hayward. So if that can kind of play to a standstill, and you kind of let Gibson do his thing down low, and if Wiggins is able to, relax defensively, maybe put him on a Marcus Smart or someone who just can't really score at will or what have you. But if he gets those easy 25 points, and then the Timberwolves certainly have a chance against the Celtics.
All right, so Minnesota trending, I think, in an upright direction, at least for this coming season. This is a big one for them, though. We'll see if all of these moves can work in 1 year. Like they did for Tom Thibodeau when he was assistant on the Celtics, actually, back in 2008. Final record standings prediction from Cory Prescott on the Minnesota Timberwolves, 48-34, fifth in the Western Conference. You can read his extensive preview on CLNSradio.com. Corey, any last thoughts on the Minnesota Timberwolves?
Yeah, actually, I changed that. I thought they'd get 50-plus wins, and I still think they really have the talent to do so, but with these new teams that need a gel, it's really difficult to really improve. So if they get to 48 wins in a really just difficult Western Conference, that'll be a win for them. And they're going to need to find scoring just to get easy buckets and get a nice offense going and kind of establish the pecking order of, obviously Towns number one, but, is Butler willing to take a back seat, or is Butler going to have to step up and, vacate Wiggins' previously number two type of role? But yeah, if you're a T-Wolves fan, you have to be excited. The franchise has been just absolutely brutal for the past, I don't even know how long. Ever since they traded Kevin Garnett, and even prior to that, they were horrible. I was looking back at their previous teams, and, KG's best teammates were a 33-year-old Latrell Sprewell and a 34-year-old Sam Cassell. So that tells you just how poorly run this franchise has been. So they're going to be a fun team to watch. I'm really looking forward to watching them on League Pass this year and seeing what they can do.
All right, he's Cory Prescott at CLNS_Prescott on Twitter. You can read his stuff at CLNSradio.com for the time being until we move to CLNSmedia.com. Corey, we will talk to you again pretty soon, I'm sure. Thanks, man.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. I'll talk to you soon.
I want to thank everybody for tuning in to Day 15 of the Boston Celtics Newsfeed's 2017-18 NBA preview. Again, you can get more analysis on the CLNSradio.com site and view any of our previous episodes on the playlist over at youtube.com/CLNSmedia. Follow CLNS on Twitter at CLNS Media and myself at CLNS_Walsh. Be sure to subscribe to the Celtics Newsfeed, rate and review us on iTunes, Stitcher, and of course the CLNS Media Network's mobile podcast app. Be sure to tune back in tomorrow when the Newsfeed will be previewing a full season of the Boogie Brow pairing in New Orleans. Until then, this is Newsfeed manager Mike Walsh signing off.